Hi, everybody, and apologies from Desi Rosenfield, the president of LAPN, who was meant to present this webinar, but unfortunately isn't well today. And so I am happy to have the opportunity of sharing this time with you, talking about something that's been an important part of the work we've done around the world and something that I hope will be highly valuable to you too. I'm David Lappin, the CEO and founder of LAPN International. And for a long time already, I guess it's almost 30 years, we've been working as LAPN. Just one moment, I'm trying to work out where we are. We've been working as LAPN, building successful organizations, creating winning teams, and inspiring greatness in leaders. And it's really that third part, the inspiring greatness in leaders, that we want to talk about a little bit today. Our process normally when we work with organizations consists of three different phases. Firstly, we tend to build a purpose-driven strategy for the organization, a strategy around which people can rally and with which customers can truly identify. When that's in place, we align people, structure, processes, and policy to that purpose-driven strategy. And the third phase is developing value-centered leaders who are aligned with the purpose and can inspire their teams to execute on the strategy. The process was developed a while back already in South Africa at a time of that country's rapid transformation. The country was going through political transformation, social transformation, economic transformation, and companies were struggling and leaders were struggling, both leaders in government and leaders in the private sector. Were struggling with that change. It was there that we developed models to help not only the corporations, but also the individuals, especially the leaders, to navigate that change. We then took the models international, implemented in various different parts of the world, and ultimately moved the business to the United States. What was interesting to us and very important to discover was that no matter in what country we taught this methodology, in what culture, in what environment, in what industry, we found the results were the same, and that the individuals were able to perform far more effectively, and companies were able to achieve much greater success and grow in a shorter length of time. The method that we developed over those years is encapsulated in the book that I wrote called Lead by Greatness, which is available both on Kindle and in hard copy at Amazon.com. And you're welcome to read it if you haven't already. It will explain a lot of the background and the philosophy of what we're going to share this evening, or what we're going to share today. And you'll find that using Lead by Greatness, you can do some of the work yourself. But the work is potentially so deep and so life-changing that the most effective way, the only way to truly do it in a transformational method, is to use a Lead by Greatness coach, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. What I want to do now is share one of our core tools, which we call the LAPN Leadership Fingerprint. It's a way to think very differently about your values and how they drive your choices. As we do this, you'll learn how to use your values to inspire the performance of others. Sometimes people don't realize the correlation between your own innermost personal values and how you impact the people around you, how you influence them and how you inspire them, and how by being able to bring those values to the fore, to know what they are and bring them to the fore and utilize them in your leadership style, your ability to inspire is much enhanced. You'll learn why a list of values isn't effective and what it is that you need instead. And you'll learn how to make quicker decisions that you won't regret. I can't promise that every decision you make is going to turn out just perfectly because you used your leadership fingerprint to make that decision. Sometimes things happen. But one thing I can assure you is that if the choices you made and the decisions you made were based on your leadership fingerprint, no matter how the results turn out, you'll never regret those decisions and those choices. In understanding the value of the leadership fingerprint, it's important to appreciate the magnitude, speed, and unpredictability of change around us. The change that we have, Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, talked about very succinctly. and quite dramatically, saying that we're on the brink of a technological revolution that is going to change the way we live, the way we relate to others, and it's going to be so big in its scale and scope and complexity that it'll be like anything, like unlike anything we've ever experienced before. And we're seeing that happen. In this environment, Klaus Schwab said, it's going to be important to have what he called both a radar system and a compass. Because in this environment, there's going to be a need to be tuned in to the ever-changing landscape and the readiness and agility to be able to make the necessary adjustments. But as we make these adjustments and as we're agile in this fast-changing environment, it's equally important that we never deviate from our true north, which is to say, in Klaus Schwab's words, a strong vision based on authentic values. And it's knowing those authentic values and how to use them that we're going to be talking about now. Consider this environment. Think of the socio-political landscape and how it's changed over the last just few years. Trump in the United States, Brexit in Britain, unpredictable. Mass coordinated democratic revolutions without leaders in places like Hong Kong and other parts of the world. The yellow jackets in France, the blurring of gender differences, the normalization of marijuana, all things which were unpredictable only a few years ago. In technology too, although a lot of the technologies we're using today have been developed over the last 10 to 15 years, they're being scaled in a way that is changing the landscape of the world. Think of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the turning point being only in 2016, a couple of years ago, when Google's DeepMind AlphaGo defeated Go champion Lee Sedol in a mind-boggling contest where machine was able to outwit the human mind. 3D printing, which has been around for decades, but is now being used in the most fascinating and practical ways. The shared economy, Uber, Airbnb, and others, blockchain, augmented reality, genetic editing, things that were unthinkable just a few years ago. And closer to home, in the area of retail, looking at the decline of some of the retail giants, Sears, an icon of retail, deteriorating from 3,500 stores to 182 stores in less than a decade. The idea of organizations who've able to successfully blend the digital and the physical, Amazon rebuilding physical bookshops and buying Whole Foods, only a year after Whole Foods proudly appointed a new CEO and believed it had a bright future ahead of it, no way predicting it was going to become part of Amazon so quickly, so suddenly, so unpredictably. And a company like Apple growing from $4.8 billion in value to over $1 trillion in value in much less than a decade. That kind of change, that kind of growth, that kind of unpredictability is the world in which we live. And it does require an innovative, agile mindset to be able to operate in this environment in a way that is successful. And all the more important that in this time of fast and unpredictable change, we have a sense of what stays the same. Is everything changing? Do we have no stable platform upon which to base ourselves and to look out at this fast-changing world? And to answer that, I invite you to think of your life as pursuing two journeys simultaneously, side by side. What we call an outer journey and an inner journey. It is your outer journey that encounters all of this change, and which, to navigate, you need speed, innovation, and agility. But your inner journey is about the development of your character. It's about the living of your values. And your values are your point of stability that stay the same. Your values don't change. Understanding the values that underpin the most important ethical decisions of your life centers you while everything else is spinning. To help leaders find their own stability while navigating the turbulence around them, we at Lappin spend time engaging these leaders in their inner journey. The inner journey reveals what doesn't change as the world does. It looks at values and purpose and helps you become masterful in a world that tests your self-mastery every day. The inner journey is about being in touch with yourself and in tune with those around you, so that in as many moments as possible and in as many varying situations, you have the capacity and the emotional stamina to control and direct your responses proactively instead of reacting instinctually. Understanding the values that underpin the most important ethical decisions of your life centers you while everything else is spinning. Your leadership fingerprint is unique because human difference goes beyond fingerprints and features. It extends to personality. We each have a different, unique personality of our own, our tastes, our preferences, and even to character, the choices we make and the reasons we make them. Leaders make moral and ethical and strategical choices all the time, and they do it differently. In a similar situation, two different people will often choose different courses of action, given the same data points, the same situation, the same environment. Neither one is necessarily right or wrong in any kind of absolute sense. The important thing is that the choices made are authentic to who each individual is and what they stand for. Many people imagine that biological or genetic factors alone impact choices, and while clearly these play a role, there are also deeper, almost spiritual factors that influence the way we make our decisions. These factors can be discovered and mapped for each individual in what we at Lappin call the leadership fingerprint. This fingerprint is as real and unique to you as the concentric ridges on the tips of your fingers. Your leadership fingerprint is your own personal moral GPS. And it's a system that shows you where to go and when you might have lost your way. Of course, learning from others is incredibly important, but the process of discovering your leadership fingerprint is about tapping into your own inner guru so that you can understand who you truly are. There is so much wisdom that resides inside you, and to be able to access that wisdom and understand what makes you different and how you can navigate complex situations in ways that are authentic to who you are, who you really are. So by way of introduction to how the leadership fingerprint is constructed, let's consider the difference between values and value drivers. So values are the sum total of all the things we believe to be good or bad, or we believe to be right or wrong. And we all have a great many different values. And interestingly, there's not a huge amount of difference between the values in which different people believe. People generally around the world in all cultures from all backgrounds believe in honesty and fairness and integrity and all the things that are good and that they would want to see their children grow up to be. But that's different from a value driver, which we consider to be that subset of values for which you have paid a price to implement, for which you have suffered inconvenience or made sacrifices, or would be willing to do so in the future. So the value drivers is a much smaller set. People generally will find that they've got 5, 6, maybe 8, occasionally 10 value drivers, whereas 60 or more values that they believe in. So for example, if you had an individual who believed in environmental sustainability, that was a value that they thought was really important for themselves and for the world. And they taught it to their family members, but they didn't really live it. They didn't make difficult choices. They didn't make sacrifices for environmental sustainability. They didn't drive cars that are environmentally attuned. They didn't take cognizance of their carbon footprint. They didn't recycle. They didn't compost. They didn't do anything that might inconvenience them in order to help environmental sustainability. That's somebody about whom we would say environmental sustainability is a value. It's something they believe in, but it isn't a value driver. It doesn't drive their behavior. It doesn't determine their choices. You'll have individuals who believe in honesty and teach their children to be honest because honesty is really important to them. But when push comes to shove and there's an issue where being honest is going to entail a considerable cost and some sacrifice, they find a way to alleviate the truth. And there again, that might be a person for whom honesty is definitely a value, but it isn't necessarily a value driver. So the first step in the process of building a leadership fingerprint is to consider your value drivers. What are your true value drivers? Not your values, but your value drivers. And making that distinction is an important process of development as you work through this methodology. We suggest there are two ways to identify your value drivers. The one is to focus on the past and to really think about your entire life, map out your life from the beginning, as far back as you can remember, until the current day, and consider some of the most significant decision points of that life. What are some of the choices you made that were not obvious choices, that were not the convenient and the expedient choice? And ask yourself, what is the value that underpinned each of those decisions? There's a reason you made those decisions. If they weren't expedient and comfortable, the chances are you made them on the basis of values, of things you believed in. You made them because you thought it was the right thing to do. And by probing that decision point, you'll find the value driver that underpins it, and that becomes one of your key value drivers. And the second method is to project into the future and imagine some of the beliefs that you would want to underscore in the decisions you take in the future. Some of the beliefs that are really important to you and that you would want to live by in your life in the future. So now you have a set of value drivers. You've got this large set of values. You've got a much smaller and focused set of value drivers, the beliefs that have actually determined the decisions that you've made and that have driven your behavior. And we take that set, and now we're going to think about the set of value drivers more systemically. Now, you're already quite familiar with systems thinking, which has become popular, and people are much more familiar with it now. Systems thinking is a holistic approach to analysis, focusing on the way that a system's constituent parts interrelate and how systems work over time and within the context of larger systems. What's important to appreciate in the area of values, and this is something significantly innovative in the way we teach values, is that values are a system. Their constituent parts interrelate. They're not a set of disconnected beliefs. And what you will be doing in the construction of your leadership fingerprint is understanding that interrelationship, understanding how your values work together, and what the overarching integrated philosophy of values is that makes you who you are as a person. It's helpful when you think of creating a system of value drivers to think of it as a dynamic set of concentric circles rather than a hierarchical pyramid. Think of it as ripples in a pond. When you drop a pebble in the pond and you set up these little ripples and waves that move to the outer edges of the pond, all the energy of those ripples coming from the core, coming from the center where you drop the pebble. If you think of values in a similar way, you'll think of your value drivers having a real core driver. This is the essence of who you are. Without your core driver, you're just not you. This sets everything else in motion. And then you'll have several value drivers, which we call the vehicles. They take your core value driver and they build on it and they expand it and they extend it outwardly towards the outer journey of your life, leading to the outcome value driver, which is the way other people might experience you. Let's have a look at an example. So let's think of three people, Anne, Paul, and Martin. And Anne, Paul, and Martin all have the same list of values, the same set of values. They have kindness, they have trust, and they have honesty. So you would think these three people are very similar in their belief systems. What's interesting is that although they have one set of values, they have three different systems of values. Let's have a look at what those systems are. So in Anne's case, she's got honesty at her core. Without honesty, she cannot begin to get into a relationship with anybody, whether at work or outside. She needs to know that the relationship is honest and is genuine. Once she has an honest relationship with somebody, she can begin to trust them. And when she's trusting of somebody, she's willing to be vulnerable, and she's willing to open herself to the kindness of others and to show kindness to others. That's Anne. We look at Paul, on the other hand. He's not willing to risk honesty unless the environment is safe and kind. So he requires kindness as a starting point. That's the core of who he is. He's a kind person at his essence. And when he is in a state of kindness and experiencing an environment of kindness, he feels safe enough to be honest, and from that honesty, trust ensues. Martin, again, is different. Same three values, but they operate differently for him. They interrelate in a different way. For him, he can't get started unless there's trust. If he trusts somebody, he'll be kind and he'll open himself to their kindness. And then he'll feel comfortable enough to be honest with them and to elicit honesty from them. So if you consider these three people and see how similar they are in their shared values and how different they are in their systems of values, we begin to understand the complexity of trust and the complexity of values. People often talk about how important it is to build trust, and people often talk about values. But my goodness, just look at these three people who've all got good values. In fact, they've got the same values. But let's have a look at what happens when they try to build trust. So imagine Anne having a conversation with Paul. For argument's sake, let's say Anne is Paul's manager, and Anne is giving Paul some feedback. And as is her way, she does it with absolute honesty and directness, because that's the only way she believes she can build trust with Paul. And yes, once she's delivered the hard message and Paul has received it with honesty and openness, then she'll step in and be kind, but not at the cost of honesty at the core. How does Paul experience that? He experiences Anne's honesty as cruel and uncaring. It doesn't allow him to build any kind of trust in Anne, and won't even allow him to be honest with her. So Anne now is wondering, I've been so direct with Paul, why has he shut down? Why is he not having an honest conversation? Why is he not responding? Because Anne has triggered Paul at his core, and she's created an environment in which he doesn't feel safe enough to be able to be honest and trusting. And then let's come to Martin. So let's imagine Paul and Martin interacting. And Paul is incredibly kind to Martin, inquires about his family, brings him a cup of coffee. What is Martin thinking? What does Paul want from me? What is he trying to manipulate me to do? Because there has to be trust before he opens himself to kindness. He's suspicious of people who are kind when there isn't already a relationship of trust. And so he doesn't reciprocate Paul's kindness. He pulls away and he shuts down. And Paul is left in a quandary. He can't understand why Martin has behaved in that particular way. And so these three people who might be working on a team together or could even be in the same family might find it very difficult to build trust. Not because they're untrustworthy people, but simply they haven't understood the way each of them have a system, have a particular fingerprint that explains the way they work with these values. The fact that they have the same values and they share the same values doesn't in any way mean that they share the same philosophy and the same way of operating, and that's why it becomes so important. In creating a system of value drivers, it's important to appreciate not all values carry the same moral weight. So in Martin's case, trust carries the most moral weight. They're all terribly important to all three of them. But for Martin, he can't get started if there isn't trust. Whereas for Paul, it's kindness, and for Anne, it's honesty. Some values are more core than others, as we see. The core values generate and sustain outer values. In Paul's case, the kindness enables honesty and trust ensues. In Anne's case, the honesty enables trust and kindness ensues. And in Martin's case, the trust enables kindness and honesty ensues. Those values that are more core lead and nourish the outer values. Paul's kindness nourishes his honesty. Anne's honesty nourishes her trust. And Martin's trust nourishes his kindness and later his honesty. Each system is unique, revealing a flow from the inner to the outer value drivers. Here's a real case of a client of ours, not her real name, of course. And let's have a look at how she operates. At her core, Donna has a strong belief in God. Her spirituality is core to who she is. So she doesn't operate well in an environment where there's total separation of church and state, in the sense that it's not something she can talk about and it's not something that is respected. She can't begin to operate without that. Her spirituality enables her empathy and her respect for others. When her spirituality is not respected, when her spirituality is not nourished and healthy, her empathy, her connection with people, her respect, her sense of fairness, all of it is damaged. She needs to have that in place to develop the passion with which to touch the lives of others. If those four value drivers are in place, she is so energetic and passionate in impacting and influences others, and then she becomes enormously accomplished, for which she's grateful. She has a strong ability to bounce back when things are hard, and for her, that is authenticity. To be able to live all of these value drivers, when all of these are in place, then she's authentic. Some people have authenticity at their core. Not Donna. She understands that she's got to live her authenticity, and that means that all of these different value drivers have to be in place. Anthony is very different. In Anthony, there's no spirituality. There's just a natural sense of responsibility to give back. He was raised with that. It's a powerful driver of his behavior. It causes him to be energetic, enthusiastic, to persevere, to go the distance. He has drive and optimism to move on. And then when that's all functioning, when he's making the difference, when he's dynamic, when he's accomplishing results, then he builds relationships, almost opposite from Donna, who needs the empathy and the respect and the relationship first before she can accomplish. Anthony needs to accomplish before his relationships become meaningful, and then he's able to show appreciation and expand his reach beyond the ordinary and make impactful difference where it counts most. So a very, very different person. You can imagine that if Anthony were to employ Donna, he might wonder what's going on, because Donna might need time, and she might find herself in a situation where she's going to want to connect with people, to bond, to be able to talk about deep and meaningful things before she gets to the point, before she gets to work. And Anthony's going to worry, what's going on? Why is she taking so long? Why is it even important to talk about this trivial stuff when we've got a job of work to do? He doesn't understand that she can only excel in the work that she has to do when those other pieces are in place. But when Anthony and Donna look at each other's leadership fingerprints, they immediately understand, and they know how to enable each other's value drivers in ways that enable them to live authentically and to live with integrity. One further point to appreciate with these leadership fingerprints is how easily we can become triggered, but we're all triggered by different things. You see, we're triggered by what's at the core of our leadership fingerprint. In the case of Anthony, if his sense of responsibility and ability to give back is compromised or challenged, if he's put in an environment where he can't be enthusiastic, if he's put in an environment where his perseverance doesn't make a difference and doesn't matter, he will become defensive, which, as you know, can manifest either in him shutting down or totally withdrawing or becoming offensive and aggressive. In Donna's case, if her spirituality or her faith is challenged, if she's treated in a way that is disrespectful, she will become defensive. And again, let's say these two people are working together. Anthony could easily make a comment to Donna unwittingly, not realizing that he's actually treating her disrespectfully, or he's questioning the strength of her spirituality and her belief in God. And as a result of that, could cause her to shut down. And he just won't understand, why is she shutting down? Why is she so defensive? Why is she sulking? Not realizing he's challenged her core beliefs. And that if his core beliefs were challenged in the same way, he too would shut down. It's just that his core beliefs are different. His core value drivers are different. And so the things that trigger him into defensiveness are not the same as the things that trigger Donna into defensiveness. Often in a man-woman relationship, this becomes an issue where one triggers the other, not realizing that the things that are really crucially important to her might not be that important to him, and vice versa. In any relationship, two parties have different value drivers, they have different fingerprints, and they're going to be triggered by different things. The only thing that's common about all of us is we do get triggered. And we do get triggered when the values that sit at the core of our fingerprints are challenged or compromised. People ask whether a fingerprint can change over time, and the answer is yes, it can. It doesn't usually change much if one's put the work in. And I must emphasize that one can do this exercise somewhat superficially, and one can try and do it oneself, and one can have some level of success at doing that. But if you're coached and challenged by a coach that understands the methodology and knows how to probe you and take you deeper and deeper, like peeling an onion layer by layer, until you get to the very core, to the very essence, something that's almost impossible to do by yourself. If you really get to that level of clarity in your leadership fingerprint, it is unlikely to change much during your life. Yes, if there's a dramatic event like a marriage or a divorce or a loss of a job or any of these things, that they can be a bit of a shuffling around, and value drivers can move, or one might come off your fingerprint and another one replace it. But if you've done a solid piece of work up front, you will find that your leadership fingerprint that you develop in this way will serve as a beacon guiding and leading you in the choices and the decisions you make for the rest of your life. So let's once again look at the step-by-step process. Generate a list of the most important values that inform the life decisions that you make. Make sure they are value drivers and not values. Consolidate your list. Remove any value drivers that you do not recall actually having made a sacrifice for, making a choice that was uncomfortable and inconvenient. Decide which value driver is most core to who you are and how you live your life. When you look at that set of value drivers that you've created, one will probably jump out at you as being the uncompromisable essence of who you are at your core. And then the fourth step is do the same with each of the value drivers. Consider which one you believe will most naturally follow on from your core. And then the third value driver, which one will most naturally follow from the core and your second one. And with the fourth one, which will most naturally follow from your first, second, and third, which will be nourished by the value driver before it, which will be supported by the value driver before it. And in this way, step by step, you will find yourself building this system that we call the leadership fingerprint. You can use your leadership fingerprint in a number of different ways. You can use it as a diagnostic tool to identify blockages. By that we mean that if you find you're just not living your life at peak, you're not feeling on top of things, you're not performing at peak, you might pull out your leadership fingerprint and, starting at the end, question which of your value drivers are not being activated, which are not being lived and not being expressed. It might be one of the outer ones, in which case it's quite easy to fix, but it might be your very core that is not being nourished. You find yourself getting distracted, becoming busy with life, and you've neglected your own values. You've neglected to nourish the things that are truly important to you. And this, I can't emphasize enough, is one of the major benefits from developing your leadership fingerprint. You will learn what about you needs nourishment, where you need to be taken care of, and exactly what to do in order to take care of that. And as you look at your value drivers, you'll see where there's neglect. And if your core has been neglected, the whole system implodes. And if it's one of the middle value drivers, one of the vehicle value drivers that isn't being expressed, then all the value drivers after it are not going to be expressed and are not going to be lived. So you know where the repair work needs to be. You know where you need to nourish yourself and where you need to take care of yourself and rebuild and reinforce the strength of your value drivers. It can be used as a tool to resolve dilemmas. You have a major decision to make, or a dilemma that's confronting you. When you look at the different options and you measure which of the options is most aligned to your leadership fingerprint, to who you are from a values perspective, that will make the choice rather easy. And it helps you set priorities. your priorities become to nourish those core value drivers. Your priorities become to operate in a way which is aligned with your value drivers and not to drift off in a life that isn't aligned with who you are as your leadership fingerprint maps you out to be. There's no such thing as a good fingerprint or a bad fingerprint, as a right one or a wrong one. It is who you are. It's like your real fingerprint or the color of your eyes or the shape of your body. It's who you are. What's important is that you're authentic. What's important is that you're living according to who you are, that your life is aligned with your own fingerprint and you're not trying to replicate someone else. So much of our lives is lived out, or are lived out, replicating others rather than just being ourselves at the deepest, most authentic level. Because replicas just don't have the same emotional power that the authentic self really does have. So to recap, and then we'll take some questions. So please feel free to put questions down in the little blue box on your side panel, and I'll do my best to answer them as soon as we're through in a couple of moments. To recap, in a time of change, changes of great magnitude, changes of great speed and unpredictability, your values keep you centered. Your leadership fingerprint represents the values that drive the choices you make. Discovering your fingerprint is about tapping into your inner guru so that you can understand who you truly are, what makes you different, and how you can navigate complex situations. So thank you very much for joining us, and I would like to see if we've got some questions that we can begin to address and get more specific for any of you who have some of the questions that you want to deal with. So please do go ahead. I see we do have some questions here. Oh, that's an interesting one. Can you share an example of how you've used your fingerprint to make a decision? Well, I guess I could. One of the value drivers on my fingerprint is to be quite focused on intellectual autonomy, so that I'm not forced into believing or teaching things that aren't true to me and aren't authentic to me. So once I had, not that long ago, I had an incredible opportunity that would have entailed quite a career change and was attractive in many, many different ways. But there was a very serious possibility that my thinking would be constricted by the political environment in which I would be operating. And for me, that was just a no-no. It wasn't something that even could vaguely be considered. It was then an easy decision and one that didn't entail a great deal of disappointment, because it was very clear to me that no matter what the situation was offering, it would compromise me in ways that would make me question who I really am. That wasn't even a possibility. A question was asked, as a practical question, will this be available for you to play afterwards to your team? Yes, it will be. If you're registered and we have your email, we will be sending you a recorded copy and the slides of this presentation. How many value drivers is normal for a fingerprint? Well, there's no normal, just as there's no normal fingerprint, but we find that less than 5 is a little bit difficult to work with. More than 8 starts getting complicated to work with. So the sweet spot is around 6 to 8. Sometimes people have got 10 or even 1 or 2 more, and that does make it challenging and difficult. But usually we find people will have between 6 and 8 value drivers. Somebody asking how long should they expect to wait to be in touch with a coach to get started? Well, we're going to send you a follow-up PDF after this webinar, and we'll tell you exactly how to get in touch with a Lead by Greatness coach who's specialized in challenging you to discover your leadership fingerprint and to create and articulate it and map it out. If you put in an inquiry within 48 hours, you'll have somebody contacting you, and you'll be able to set up the time to do these exercises. Again, from the book, From Lead by Greatness, you'll find some guidelines as to how to do it. But if you want to develop an instrument that you're going to use for the rest of your life, it's worth investing the time and effort in doing it professionally, and we'll support you and enable that in every way that we can. Somebody asking, do you have different fingerprints for your personal and your business life? A great question. And I've only had one client that we as a team, out of all our thousands and thousands of clients, only had one who seemed to really have two different leadership fingerprints. And it's problematic because at the end of the day, the leadership fingerprint is who you are, and you want to be the same person in your work and your business life as you are in your personal life. That doesn't mean you act the same. Clearly, there are different levels of vulnerability. There are different levels of exposure. There's a professional way to behave at work, which is different from the way you might behave in the comfort of intimate relationships at home. But you don't change who you are. And so if you have emerged with two leadership fingerprints, you haven't gone deep enough. It's just, think of it a little bit like a tree. You might start on two different branches in a tree, and the branches might be quite far from each other if they're a big tree. But if you get deeper and deeper, you'll come to the trunk, and every tree has one trunk. A leadership fingerprint is the trunk of who you are. It's the trunk of your belief system, and it nourishes and feeds the rest of your being, just as the trunk feeds the entire tree. If you've got two trunks, you've got two trees, and that's a problem. Is there, great questions, thank you. Is there a relationship between personality and core values? The difference between values and personality is really the difference between character and personality. And I like to make those differences because, as you know, there are many, many personality tests, the Myers-Briggs and dozens of others, and they're all good and they're all useful. But they measure personality, which is really the way the world experiences you. And that can be changed to some degree. It's not something you're born with and can never change, although one has strong tendencies one way or another. So whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, that's not a matter of character. You can have honest introverts and honest extroverts, and you can have crooked introverts and crooked extroverts. So personality says nothing about character. Your core values, your value driver, your leadership fingerprint is about your character. It's about the choices and decisions you make, irrespective of who else is involved. They're between you and yourself, or between you and God if you're a person of faith. That's the character part, that inner journey, whereas personality is much more linked to the outer journey. Any other questions before we close off? So once again, please feel free to contact us, to reach out by email or our website. We will be sending you a copy of the webinar, as I mentioned, and we'll be sending you a PDF with details of how to take this further should you want to do it. This is an amazing thing, by the way, to do with a team. It's not just for yourself. For personal development, it's incredible. For developing your leadership capacity, it's enormously powerful. And when you do it with a team, and again, one of our coaches can meet with your team and do this. When a team shares their leadership fingerprints, not only do their behaviors become clear to one another, and does one develop great respect for one another because one understands where it's coming from, but a huge amount of trust is built. We consider the sharing of well-developed leadership fingerprints as the finest form of team building and trust building that we've ever encountered. So our coaches are available for that as well, if any of you have an interest for that. Okay, then I think that we're done. Appreciate your participation so much. And again, apologies from Desi. But I hope that I've been able to walk in her footsteps to some degree and give you some of what you expected to achieve and to learn in this webinar. And we would love to hear from you if you have comments, whether they're positive or critical. We would love to hear them because that helps us improve and get better. So any feedback we can get from you about the webinar, how much you got from it or didn't, how we can improve it, all of that would be enormously valuable to us, and we would welcome it. Thank you for your attention and your participation, and we look forward to hearing from you.